So 7 1/4 minus 3/8 is not got a clue. So a little while back I restored this Kismet Junior foot pump that belonged to my granddad. Now I just move it about in the workshop and it gets covered in dust, so I thought I would make a box for it, something a bit like what it would have come in originally, like in these pictures here. So I want some finger joints, I want the decal on the front, warped wood, everything. So I brought home some pallet slats from work. They're not the greatest of condition, but they're the width that I need. Then after giving up in using inches, because I thought I'd use inches to be nostalgic, I moved back over to millimetres and marked the wood up and took it over to the miter saw. I cut out the various parts I needed over there. And you'll see me wearing sunglasses throughout this video. That isn't because I'm trying to be one cool cat, that's because it's the only way I can stop my hay fever and sneezing every 10 seconds. Now although I always denail the pallet slats when I break them up off the pallets, it seems I missed one here because I did actually hit a nail whilst cutting through it, but the multi-material blade cuts through it no problem at all. Then moving over to the table saw, I can square the edges up and give them a clean up whilst I'm at it. I also use this clamp on the table saw sled as a stop block and then just cut everything to the right lengths. Then as this pallet wood was a little bit warped, I went over to the planer thicknesser, and as you do over on the planer thicknesser, you plane one side and then you run it through the thicknesser. The wood actually cleaned up pretty well, so I was left with these 6 pieces. So these 2 pieces of wood here are the thicknesses of the finger joints I want to cut. Now to do this I'm going to try and adapt the box joint cutting jig that I made, and hopefully it should work okay. So I used these 2 pieces to set up the jig, secured it in place, and then double checked that it wasn't too tight. Then I can make a start cutting the finger joints. Now this is the first time I've ever cut finger joints, and they weren't 100% perfect. I'd like to think I could do better. Maybe it's because it's the first time I tried it, maybe it's because of the jig. I'll explain a bit more at the end. So with these lovely pieces lined up, it was time to glue up. So I tried this method first of gluing up. However, you'll see that it probably wasn't the best idea because all the glue just dripped through the finger joints. So after realising how much of a wally I was being, I changed my approach. I decided to lay the glue across the top of the finger joints, and then using this little stick, I could work the glue into the joints. Then I could get this side slotted in, which went together pretty easy. But this side seemed to be quite a bit harder, so I broke out my inner ninja and gave the wood a karate chop, and that didn't work, so I had to resort to using clamps to squeeze the joints together. Basically, this is where things went a little bit wrong when I was trying to cut the finger joints, and it started off fine. However, I probably got a little bit carried away cutting them, and I realised if I put a little bit too much pressure on the finger joint I previously cut up against the stop, then it opened the finger joint up ever so slightly, so it meant the next finger joint was slightly bigger, which meant the next one was slightly bigger again, and so on. Anyway, after battling with it with all different clamps, I finally got there in the end. Then I could check for square, and then I could clamp it up and leave it to dry. Now, whilst it was gluing, I did draw around the inside of the base on this piece of wood, which would be the bottom. And because I want the base inset into the bottom of the box, I'm going to cut out these grooves around the base. So I could get the table saw set to the right height. Then with the line on the wood lined up against the blade, I could move the table saw fence in so I could cut the right width. Then after making those relief cuts, I could flip the wood onto its side and cut the edges of wood down to their final dimensions, which was about 8mm. Then I could go along, break all the sides off, apart from this one stubborn bit, which I got rid of using the hammer. Then with the cuts cleaned up, I could add a liberal amount of glue around it and get the box sat on top. Now I want the box to slightly overhang the base to make it look like the base has shrunk back over the years, so I'm just checking that there's an even gap all the way around. Now, when I glued this box up, I only applied clamps along the side of the box. I didn't bother putting any front and back, because again I want it to look like the wood is bowed and the joint has come apart slightly. I got the overhang just right on the sides because it does look like the wood has shrunk back, although I know it's not. It gives the effect it did. Now it's the next day and it's onto the sanding step, so using the ABRACS P60 I could sand the finger joints nice and flush. So to give the box its worn grubby look, I thought I'd crack out the blowtorch and give the wood a good singe in, if that's a word, so it looked like the grime's ingrained into the wood. I also managed to set the doormat on fire, which was good. So I had a little play on the computer and come up with this template, put some packing tape over the writing, and then set about the laborious task of cutting out all the letters. It probably took me about an hour to do it all, but it's just one of those things you got to do. Then I could get the spray adhesive on the box and on the template, and I'm just lining it up by eye here to make sure it's straight and level and in the middle. Then another tricky task was trying to apply these centres of the letters that I'd cut out. Not only do they want to stick to your fingers, they didn't actually want to stick to the box. Then using this matte black spray paint, I did give it 2 coats of paint and because it was left out in the sun to dry, it didn't take long at all. Then when I removed this template, I could see things weren't quite right. Unfortunately, the spray paint had bled into the grain of the wood. And you can see in the word "the", it's hardly legible. But I figured I got this far, so I might as well see what I can do to sort it. So I wrapped some sandpaper around this thin piece of wood, and I set about trying to sand away the paint where it had bled, just so that the letters were more legible. It worked to some extent, although they didn't come out perfect. Maybe this will add to the character, I don't know. Then I could get the hinges secured to the lid. But then this posed another problem, because when I closed the lid, the bottom of the screw heads bottomed out in the box. So then I had to come back with the chisel and cut out a shallow groove just so the screw heads could fit into it. So I'm going to use this Supreme wax polish to try and give it its sort of antique look. When I first applied it, it was quite dark, however it has since lightened, so I may come back over and give it a second coat. And when I posted a picture of this project on Instagram, I had a great bit of advice from someone on there. They said they use steel wool and white vinegar to age wood. I've got to admit that's a technique I've not heard of, but it's something I'll definitely try in the future. So here's the finished box. I'm mildly happy with the project. It's a bit disappointing that the paint ran, and I would like to have got the finger joints to fit a lot better, although like I say, it was my first time doing them and I probably didn't have the right jig for it. But at the end of the day, I was trying to achieve something like the pictures I showed you at the very start of the video, where the box looks aged, the wood is warped, have ill-fitting lids, and it looks dirty and grimy. If nothing else, I've actually now got somewhere to put the foot pump. Anyway, thanks for watching along. Hope you might have picked up one or two things from this. If you have any aging tips for wood, drop them in the comments below, and I'll see you again in the next one.